Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public meeting, the second public meeting for the new park at East Iliff and Bellaire. We're going to be talking with you tonight about some of the feedback that we've received and some other information. But before we get started, I wanted to talk through some administrative things about the meeting tonight. We do have the opportunity to raise our hands and ask questions in the meeting, but please raise your hand before you come off mute. We also have Spanish interpretation this evening. So before we jump into the meeting, I want to introduce our interpreter, Sam. Sam, go ahead.
Thank you. Bienvenidos a todos a nuestro plan maestro del día de hoy, la reunión número 2. Queríamos recordar a todos que para las reuniones virtuales, por favor, manténganse en silencio con la cámara apagada y levante la mano si es que desea hacer una pregunta o un comentario. Para la interpretación, haga clic en el globo terráqueo para cambiar a inglés o español.
Okay, interpretation is on.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening. My name is Mallory Roybal. I am the East District Parks Planner with Denver Parks and Rec. And this evening, we're also joined by Laura Morales from Denver Parks and Rec. The rest of our project team is comprised of Mark, Aisha, and Nick from DHM, and Nora and Dean. And of course, we already introduced our interpreter for the evening, Sam. I also wanted to introduce this evening, we are welcomed by Councilwoman Kendra Black. So Kendra, if you could say a few words, that would be great.
Thanks, Mallory, for working on this effort and for everyone on the team. Really appreciate it. This neighborhood has for decades wanted a park. And so finally they're going to get one. It's taken a lot longer than they had hoped, but it's a good day when we add parks in Denver. So thank you all for being here so that you can have a voice in the kind of park that you get in your neighborhood. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So just to reiterate some of the timeline that we're on, this evening, we're going to be presenting to you some concepts that we've received from some public input from our early survey results. We will have 3 concepts that we'll go through this evening to present to you, and just some general project information. So I'll jump into the timeline a little bit here so you can see where we fall. We're on the second public meeting for this project. Our first public meeting was held in September. And we also plan to have a third public meeting to reveal the final concept design sometime in the new year in January. Following the master plan development, which will be later in the early year of 2023, we will have design and construction that will be followed by an anticipated construction following the design process. So we have that general timeline moving from master plan to design and construction. So I'll hand it over to DHM. I think Aisha, you're up.
Okay. Actually, I think Nora, did you want to talk a little bit about ways to participate?
Sure thing. So in addition to tonight, you can come and see us at the University Hills Holiday Market. By us, I mean the project team, from 10 to 1 p.m. on November 20th. We'll be at the holiday market at the usual U Hills, where the farmers market takes place. And we'll have a lot of the concepts that you're going to see tonight. We'll be able to speak to those, and we would love your feedback. After this meeting, we'll send out another notice with the meeting recording and the information about the holiday market times and locations. So share with your friends and family and come and see us again if you wish.
And buy lots of things from all of our local vendors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the survey results. We got 307 responses, which is wonderful. Thank you, everyone who participated, told your friends to participate, who forwarded it. So we of the 307 responses, 4 things really rose to the top, and we've summarized these in these following slides. So I think in terms of program, a number of people asked about including a playground, making sure that the plantings were inviting, also including trails, walking trails, and incorporating shade. There was a request for playgrounds that were designed for kids 0 to 5 years old, and also for the older kids. Making sure the playground is ADA accessible so that everyone can enjoy it regardless of their abilities. There was a request for a splash pad if possible. Also community and/or ornamental gardens. We're going to look a lot about that, talk a lot about that. Also creating a setting for visitors who want to enjoy nature. There was the idea of packing this small space with beautiful plantings and really creating a hidden garden, a hidden gem in the city. Really happy to say a number of people requested native plantings and xeriscape. So moving away from our water heavy bluegrass turf and looking at something a little bit more earth friendly. Planting plenty of shade trees, incorporating some structures with shade coverings, maybe at picnic tables, similar to the playground, walking trails that are accessible to all, and then trails for rolling. So we got strollers and wheelchairs, and scooters and kid bikes and skateboards. So we want to incorporate, people on their feet and people on wheels. A number of people in the neighborhood wanted to ensure that the park is well maintained. This could happen with adequate funding for ongoing maintenance, but just verifying or, including plenty of trash receptacles and dog waste disposal bags. And so there were 2 other items that kind of rose to the top. Making sure the park is safe for all the visitors. Ensuring that people experiencing homelessness do not deter other visitors from enjoying the park. A number of people noted illegal drug use and crime in the area, and there is a concern that that'll occur in the new park. There was a comment about considering fencing around the park perimeter. Also considering security lighting or curfews to discourage nighttime gathering in the park. And we're going to talk more about these safety precautions in a moment. And then also just noting that, whatever nearby street enhancements, such as bike lanes and crosswalks to improve pedestrian access to the park. And then lastly, and I think representative of the 307 responses, was really planning for a variety of users, including and especially families with children, especially young children, and dog owners. That's where we see the demographics for this area and the people who will use this park skewing. So because there are many families in the area with small children, especially children under 5 years old. There's a lot of neighbors with dogs and dog owners, but there's currently no nearby parks to take dogs. You have to cross over, Evans or Colorado. And then, the request to provide at least some opportunities for the dog owners with either a dedicated fenced dog run, off-leash area, or just simply a place to walk their dogs. So thinking of those 4 things that came up, I wanted to just talk a little bit, jumped ahead of myself, talking more about program, just reiterating that, the things that really came to the top were a place to enjoy some nature and to relax, informal play, exercise, using those trails to walk and get your steps in, but also requests for a playground and a picnic area and a community area. So fitness stations, structured games, maybe, garden beds, those were not as popular. But now I did want to address, some of the concerns people had, assure you that we heard you and that we are thinking about how to incorporate these in the plans. But I'm jumping ahead of myself again. For everybody who joined us at the pop-up at the farmers market a couple weeks ago, thank you for coming out. We got some great feedback. You know, again, a lot of requests in the playground and including, again, native plantings, you know, maybe some native plants with some signage or info. And we definitely heard that and have incorporated that. So, and to the fella I met with the really cute dog, I just want to tell you again, he's really cute. But now I'm going to talk about some of the areas, some of the issues that we heard and that we are addressing. And, you know, really one of those is security. You know, as landscape architects, DHM design takes this very seriously. One thing we do is we apply what are often called principles of crime prevention through environmental design. You know, some of that is trying to mark the entries to the park, trying to really maximize surveillance, you know, maximizing visibility of people in the park from people outside the park, kind of eyes on the street. You know, we do want to include and make sure we provide adequate nighttime lighting. This image on the left is a potential example of that. You know, we do need to balance, you know, the needs of the community. We do have homes directly adjacent to the park, and also, you know, balance some of the standards that the city of Denver has set up to really limit light pollution, among other things. So that is a balance that we really will be refined in the next phase once we've selected a preferred alternate, and then start to refine that. Maintenance, you know, maintenance is important for a lot of reasons. And one of those is to really create a sense of ownership and investment in the park. And just going back, I just wanted to remind everybody too, you know, we do have our park rangers and we do have the police. And also, you know, stated park rules are the park is closed from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. and there is no overnight camping allowed in the park. So, but now moving on to maybe a little bit funner stuff, dog parks. So a lot of people in the community have dogs, want a dog park. And we do have a concept where we've included that. I just wanted to let you all know though too, that Denver Parks and Recreation does have a dog park master plan. And here is a list of some of the parks that have been built out. And you can see those sizes vary. Our park is going to be in the smaller size, similar to the dog run at Carla Madison Recreation Center or Sunny Lawson Park. If we go to the next slide, we can see a comparison of those sizes. I'm not sure if any of you dog owners out there are familiar with these. You'll have a, you know, maybe a better idea of what we're talking about. You know, Rail Yard Park at the end is a lot larger. You know, we're trying to balance the needs of the children and the dog owners and what everybody wants in the park. But we do have an opportunity to include a small dog run if that's what the community wants. Another thing, so just a reminder that, you know, Denver loves our dogs. And we do have some typologies and some guidelines for that. So this is, again, something that we'll be developing when we go in after the master plan and to refine that preferred alternative. So also wanted to just show you a couple of examples of playgrounds. You know, similar, we will get way into the weeds in the future, but, you know, I think we're probably thinking of structured play. We can start to reinforce any theming possibly with that play, but we've got some nature-based, we've got, you know, I think we want to look for things that are inclusive, that offer a variety of activities to keep both, you know, the young kids and the older kids interested. And then, I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to add anything to that, or we can also go into the landscape typologies. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Karen.
Sorry, I'm jumping around, but
That's
yes,
okay.
we're looking at some different theming on playgrounds that would support that character of whatever the preferred concept is, whether it's the cultural community, the Dutch heritage, nature-based or inspired play. that you see in a couple of these images, or if there's other themes, it adds a lot of character, a lot of excitement to a park like this as we start considering that.
And one thing that's really wonderful is a lot of playground equipment manufacturers have finally started to really step up and address the need for inclusive play. So making sure that everybody on the playground can get up and spin and climb and swing and all the things incumbent with play. I want to talk a little bit about these landscape typologies, and these are all leading to the great unveiling of the 3 schemes. But we're going to show a couple of different options, but up in the top of this slide, you can see what I'm calling a formal garden, and below that, just turf, mown turf, which have their place in a park, possibly. There's so much more maintenance and water intensive. The city and a lot of the people who participated in the survey, talked about a preference for a more resilient, drought tolerant, and low water landscape. One of the benefits of that, Mark, if you went to the next slide, is in addition to, providing carbon sequestration, looking at urban island heat, they also provide habitat. They also provide, great habitat for pollinators and other critters. And I know with some of the folks on the Denver Parks and Recreation staff, they really push us to make these gardens colorful, really visually interesting. So, that's what we heard from the community, and we're trying to incorporate a lot of that. So thank you. I think we have some other images from other Denver parks where they've gone with, again, a more resilient landscape. So we can start to include, some visual interest. Leading up to the big unveiling, just a little, quick comment about the existing park. We're thinking about ways to access it. We are limited with some of these overhead power lines. Some of the trees there may need to be smaller in stature, like an ornamental tree. It's important to limit access next to that driveway at the school. And wanted to create a lot of vegetation and create these buffers along the edge of the park where we're up against either single family homes or multifamily homes or the park. And so I think with that, we've put together 3 options. The greenhouse, which is really, in recognition of Ground Cover's greenhouse and their legacy of this area. We incorporated some very formal gardens, what we would anticipate being more formal gardens that kind of even mimic the landscape that's there now with all of these concrete sidewalks between their hoop houses. And then weaving through the site is a nice wide path. And from that path, we have some of the different amenities. So going from Warren to East Iliff, you can see you enter into at the entry. There are the gardens. We've also want to incorporate some areas for bike parking and just some seating areas, some social gathering. And then to the west, west of that walk is then the playground. We see a separation between the 2- and 5-year-olds, the little kids and the big kids, with what we're proposing to be just a covered shade pavilion with some seating and picnic tables below or underneath. In the greenhouse scheme, we have a very limited open turf area. And you can see that is the lighter green color. And then from that, we have some more formal gardens. And then quite a nice open space, again, of this more resilient, native, low water landscape. Dogs love it. And I think what we can also incorporate in there is maybe some more informal paths. You'll see we've tried to really plant up those edges. That's critical for shade, and that's critical for screening, providing a little bit of buffer to those homeowners. So I'm seeing some comments coming in, and that is great. We are going to have an open Q&A. I think to Elisa's comment, we would work with the Denver Department of Denver Parks and Rec and their resiliency staff to look at native, probably short grass and really colorful forbs for that landscape, for that native landscape. And then we really just we want to make sure that everybody's listening and you have more opportunities to participate, but we do have a poll for you. I think Laura is going to help me with that. So I just wanted to ask, you know, what do you like about this greenhouse concept? One of the things we thought of was that playground configuration. I know someone else, my kiddo was a runner. We like the playground configuration where you have a view to both sides, the formal gardens. Also, you know, the resilient landscape. There's quite a bit of resilient landscape in here. And then if you have something else that you saw, write it in the chat. You know, this is your opportunity. This is one of many opportunities to really get your feedback.
And we have 18 that have participated so far. So we'll just give it a little bit longer and get some votes in.
But we have 2 more to review. And, you know, my experience oftentimes with this is, you know, we come to the community with a couple of different options. And really what happens is a final plan that's a hybrid of all of the best parts of each plan. So when you say you like the greenhouse, you are not just picking that one, but just pointing out what you do like about it.
Well, I'm going to close the poll and show the results. Here we go. Can you see those?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Great.
Uh,
Split 50-50 pretty
I
much
know.
at playground and resilient landscape, followed by formal gardens, and then stuff that I'm assuming is all exciting in the chat.
Some of the things that have come in on the chat that people like are, they love the trees, yay, bike parking, and agree with the simplicity in the trees. Like the green grass because so much of the neighborhood is not green, is another comment. And another up comment for simplicity.
Great. We got it. Well, why don't we move on to Dutch heritage? So with the Dutch heritage concept, oh, I guess we should have opened that one up before. With the Dutch heritage concept, you know, one thing we learned previously and then was reiterated to us at the farmers market was that this neighborhood was originally settled long ago by Dutch immigrants. And so we really wanted to draw on that cultural heritage and see how we could incorporate that. With this concept, you can see we have a very formal alignment with entry plazas at either end of the park at Warren and Iliff. You know, and then the park is sort of broken through in the middle with what we're calling windmill gardens. And this would be a chance to potentially do a more formal garden, you know, planted, colorful, more formal garden. And then that also breaks 2 zones apart. So we have along Iliff, we have a more native low water use landscape for more passive recreation. And then on the other side of the windmill along Warren Street and the school, we have a more programmed area. So here we have a fairly large community pavilion with seating to host community events. Shade, of course, is always critical. To the east of that, we're showing a larger open turf area. And this might be, especially with that long linear shape, you know, that might be the place for Frisbee or pick up soccer game with the little kiddos. And then on the other side of the pavilion will be the play areas. And again, divided into really the 2 to 5 play area, and then also the 5 to 12. We've also incorporated what we've heard from a lot of people, which is bike parking. And we have plenty of rooms on there for trash cans and waste receptacles for the dogs. Same thing, heavily planted, really concerned about this buffer between the park and the community. So thank you, Emily, for your comment about the play dates and the neighborhood meetings. So similar to our last concept, we have a poll. And just, picking some things up that you might like about this one. So one of them is that very formal arrangement. I mean, it's this long linear, and it's very zoned. We have that large shelter for community events. Those entry plazas are a little bit more formal than the other concepts. And then, of course, if you have anything else, please write it in the chat.
And actually, while we're looking at, or while people are taking the question, can you go back to the picture? I think that was actually
That's a good
helpful.
idea. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, just in case anything else needs to get
Sure.
into the chat.
And, two things to reiterate. We are going to have an open discussion at the end of this meeting, so you will have more opportunities. And also, these plans will be further refined. We can add in more seating. We can add in more trails.
Right, and I think we've got most of the responses. I'm going to end the poll. Okay, now I'm going to end the poll. And here are the results. Yeah, the shelter community gathering area was the top one.
Great. Center by the gardens. And I think to Jennifer's comment, one thing we'd maybe do with these gardens and these is, we have a walk around the garden, and then, maybe part of that is some seating incorporated in there too. That's great.
Yeah, some of the things that came into the chat in terms of what people liked is the combination of the formal gardens and the low water areas, a large turf area for running and lounging. Jennifer indicated that she would like to see seating in the north and center by the gardens. And then love the pavilions. The windmill is neat too, says Emily.
That's great. And I think there was a question about the native low water landscape. And that would be, yes, you can walk through it. You can't roll through it. It would be probably a taller grass, interspersed with some flowering forbs. It would be a more, again, just native landscape. I'm trying to think of a good example. And again, we can go back to those slides at the end of this, but it would be, it really wouldn't necessarily be for running or rolling, although you could certainly walk through it. There was a question about.
Yeah, Jacob does ask, does the windmill obstruct walking straight through the park?
No, it doesn't have to. We could, but I think right now that would be almost like a plaza. So it would be on the same plane as the walk. So you wouldn't have to walk around it. So we've closed the poll. Should we go to our last one? Yes, the kiddos will run through it anyway. So this one we're calling, I'm actually going to, before I get into the urban wild, I do want to address a question that came up, which I think is a good one. Does Denver Parks and Rec use pesticides in their native areas? And I don't believe they do. I think that's the same thing with the turf areas. I think they've limited the use of pesticides.
We don't use pesticides in the native areas. There are applications of certain weed controls in some of our larger turf areas.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mallory. wanted to be sure. So lastly, we have the urban wild. And yes, there's a dog park. So we have enclosed a fenced dog park, or really a dog run, of about 8,300 square feet. So this one we were really embracing, and we were thinking of another way to talk about these resilient landscapes. So you can see that the park is bordered by, a lot of, again, native landscape. And then we've also incorporated some areas, what we're calling demonstration gardens. So these could be very specific to like pollinator gardens, and maybe a rain garden. I think it would be important to include in that some interpretive signage to let people know, to understand what we're doing, and also how these might be applicable to their own homes and their own properties. So, looking at this plan from Iliff to Warren, you come in, there's an entry plaza. Skirting the edge on a nice wide path is a fenced dog park. We have some smaller paths, and then you have this buffer of the gardens between the fenced dog park and then also the playground. So again, we've incorporated a playground, kind of privileging the smaller kids. We've tucked a little picnic area in there. And then we have a community area closer to closer to Warren, that would be, we have a smaller pavilion there. And that's where we've incorporated some green turf, some green mowed turf that would be more comfortable to sit and lay on. So we're calling that the event lawn. Lots of trees, lots of playgrounds, and then kind of a wavy path through the space. And of course, we are incorporating bike parking. We'll have waste receptacles. I think with this plan, you can see on the Warren Street side, we are indicating a pedestrian crosswalk at Bellaire, and we have the possibility to skew that crosswalk a little bit to move it, away from the driveway and a little bit closer to that entry plaza. So I'm seeing some comments that we need more seats. So Laura, do you want to launch the poll?
Just launched.
There we go. So some of the things we would ask, like, what do you like about this one? We have a lot of native planting areas for the pollinators and the other critters. We have a dog run, really, a small dog park. We have a nice buffer along the east side of the park. I didn't talk about this, but we're actually looking at incorporating maybe a little bit of topography there, just to provide a little bit of buffer to the other adjacent properties. And then, of course, if there's something else that we didn't bring up, write it down in the chat.
Okay, we have heard from about 21. Typically it's been 28, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds.
Okay.
Okay, it's getting closer. Get
Mhm.
your last vote in. All right, I am going to close the poll.
Let's see what the results are. Great.
Yep, a lot closer on these, the native planting at the top, but not by a super lot because the buffer is next, the dog park, and then the commons and other.
Okay. Well,
This particular design got a lot of comments in the chat. I'll read a few just for the purposes of sharing. There was a lot of enthusiasm for this design. It seems to be people's favorite. On the whole, there is some division regarding a dog park. There are people who really like it and people who would prefer not to have one in this park. People really like the curving paths in this park, in this design, the meandering paths. Seating and shade continues to be a feature that people are looking for. The location of the dog park is also being discussed in the chat, whether it's closer to multifamily housing, if it might make more sense for that to be closer to multifamily housing. There's even mention of putting a hill in this one.
Yeah, I saw that, and somebody asked about sledding. I would say it would be very, very modest sledding. It would be better for a toddler.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get up so high that somebody could, potentially, climb up there and look into windows. But and I see a lot of toddlers sledding in City Park, where they've embanked around the lake. So be something probably comparable to that, or wouldn't be that tall probably, but I mean, it would be, a modest run, but with a good snow and a good toddler, it'd be a lot of fun. So I've been doing a lot of talking. I think if we go to the next slide, we kind of looked at a comparison of all of those. So, you can tell us which one you prefer, but then we really want to open it up to Q&A and questions you might have. So why don't we just gut check, see which concept you prefer.
The responses are coming in a little slowly, so I'm guessing it is a tough choice, or maybe a lot of people want to mix and match because that happens, like you mentioned.
That's
so,
exactly.
Yeah. So the top one you have, go ahead and select, but yeah, this is not a hard vote and we're not picking one off of this poll. So, okay. All right, we're getting closer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
I think I know what it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, so Urban Wild ended up on top, followed by the Greenhouse and then the Dutch Heritage.
And it seems like a lot of the feedback we got on Urban Wild, though, was the maybe sort of more curvy aspects of it and showing some more of these smaller secondary walking trails. But we will take these all under consideration.
And just to add, Aisha, if there's items or features in any of the other park designs that you like in your favorite one, we can look at hybrids, incorporating some of those ideas in here. If you liked some of the formal gardens or the bent seating or the bike racks that are shown in another concept. So those are all good comments to hear, and we'd love to hear what you think.
I loved seeing the comments. I think our next, I think we were just going to open it up, right? We're going to ask people if they have any questions or comments and they want to speak out. Of course, if you could please raise your hand in the chat.
Niachi has a question.
Hi, I've turned on my video. I don't know if it matters, but
that's fine.
I don't know if I missed this, but will the playground have ample shade? Because we go to Eisenhower all the time, and the days that it gets really, really hot, the entire play structure is hot, and it's just totally unusable.
I would just answer that that is a number one concern from folks is the shade, and and the structures do get hot. When the playground or when the plan evolves, we'll take that into consideration, and it's possible that we could look at equipment that has integral shelter. And then of course we are planting a lot of trees. Those won't provide immediate shade, but your concerns I think certainly are heard. And I think, yeah, we would probably look at either some shade sails or even some equipment that has, some shade incorporated in it.
Thank
But
you.
we're a little ahead of that still.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Karen, go ahead.
So if you look at the overview of the streets and where the parks are in there, my only concern is having kind of main entrances into the park on streets that aren't fully going through. So like Birch Street is a full street. And so adding crosswalks on the street where I'm talking specifically about Iliff, where, Denver Academy has 450 students that are getting there and leaving from there every day. And then there's a daycare center farther west on Iliff. So I'm just concerned about where the crosswalks are. I think if you can make them at a major street like Birch and enhance them so people really pay attention, that would be better than having extra ones in the middle of a block.
And then I think if we go to just one of the other plans, Mark, we can start to see our initial suggestions. And I think so it's awfully faint in here, but we do have, we're lining up our pedestrian crosswalks with the, I'm seeing Eliza's comment, coming off of the Bellaire and both Bellaire, but your comment about Birch, I see that. So you're thinking like if there were a crosswalk between over Birch.
Right, and so there is a crosswalk there now, but it's not very prominent. It could be made much safer. And then I worry that people are stopping at that four-way stop because it's, it makes sense. It's a street that goes through, but then you go half a block down and it's like, oh, and there's one here, even though the street doesn't go through. I just worry people won't pay good enough attention.
And so for part of this master planning exercise, DHM design, we will be meeting with the departments of transportation and infrastructure with DPR. And I think this is an ongoing conversation of trying to enhance the safety, certainly getting there and being safe is important. And
I think Councilwoman Black had her hand up as well.
Thanks. I was just going to ask if you could give people addresses of pocket parks they can go visit to see kind of the scale. Because it's really hard to imagine, obviously looking at a drawing, and even when you're there, it's such a wreck, it's hard to imagine. So I think it would be helpful if you provided to community members, and I could put it in my newsletter, and I know that the neighborhood organization, I'm sure, would help get it out. Maybe just a list of 10 pocket parks, in the city. And if people are interested, they could just go look and check them out and see what things look like on a smaller scale.
We can provide that. We actually don't have many examples of what we would call a pocket park. I can provide a list that's kind of our smaller scale parks. This one is unique in its size and its shape and how linear it is. So we don't have a really good example of that, but we certainly have some examples of some smaller parks throughout the city that we can reference for those who are curious about visiting.
Okay, that would be great. And maybe also for the ones you are providing that are bigger, if you could just put some perspective on it for size, like this is 1.9 acres. And if you compare it to, if you give us a park that's 4 acres, you know, just let people know the difference in those sizes.
Yep, we can do that.
I ride my bike on the Bear Creek, and there's one in Sheridan. I'll send you the link to that, Mallory, that you ride by on your bike, and that might be a good one for people to see. It's actually smaller than this, but it's quite lovely. So I'll send you the name of that one too. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilwoman Black. Jody, go ahead.
We're opening our video too. Okay, hi. Oh, I think they can see us, but I can't see me. So Olivia and I here, we're playground experts, and we live less than 2 miles away. And we can't wait to share like really good specific feedback with you about what makes a playground really great. So thanks for that. There was something else? What? Oh, thank you.
Wait, never mind.
Well, when we get to it, we will call on your expertise.
Thank you, Jody and Olivia.
You know, I think one comment I've seen a couple of times, and I think it's pretty critical, is that, you know, we don't have a lot of space in this area to accommodate all of the different needs. So the compromise is a smaller dog run. You know, we don't have a lot of space to do a really good dog park. There's a balance there I think we need to achieve, you know, maybe just by having lots of areas for people to walk their dogs on a leash. Is the solution, instead of, you know, maybe not a super great dog run.
Carlos has a question. Go ahead, Carlos.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to give my input in terms of, like, I really like the possibility of like a hybrid between the greenhouse and what was the third one? Not the Dutch one, the
Urban Wild?
Yeah, Urban Wild. I like the combination of those two. I guess maybe a smaller dog park, I think, is nice because it gives you more lawn space. And then my other question was, and sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself or if I missed this from the previous meeting, is what's the timeline for the park?
Yes. So we're in our second public meeting. We'll have a third public meeting, and we'll finish off with a final concept to present to the community in that meeting. And then following the master plan, we'll jump into the design process. So that will be the moment that we really get some feedback on those particular items, like what was mentioned with the playground and the lighting, and very specific design elements at that point in the process. Following that design process, we'll go into construction. We don't have an exact timeline because it will depend on the design process and how long that will take. Generally, that would take about the same time that we are in for this master plan phase.
Gotcha. Is there, I mean, like, maybe I'm just a little anxious, but like, what's the general time, like in the next 2024 mid, like what are we shooting for?
Yeah, we'll aim for construction around 2024, 2025.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In the chat, that we have 2 recommendations for people to look at pocket parks. One's not in Denver, Bradburn Village in North Westminster, and then somebody else mentioned Turtle Park. I'm assuming that's the one in Park Hill, which is a park with a very small footprint. Those are just two ideas that people are sharing. There was a question earlier in the chat from several people regarding the possibility of a loop path around the perimeter of the park space.
And I think that would certainly be, we can certainly incorporate that. And that is one thing we see more so represented in the urban wild, which we have up. We are trying to be respectful of the adjacent neighbors. So we were really pushing more for sort of path that looped in and around the park as opposed to just the perimeter. But I think as we move forward, we'll look for more connectivity with a loop path.
There is another question regarding a marker or information about the Dutch history and heritage in the neighborhood, regardless of what design is chosen. Is there a possibility of sharing a historical marker?
We have options to do interpretive signage at our parks, and that could be certainly something that we look into as we learn a little bit more about that history, but that is an option that we could pursue.
We do have a question. Actually, we've talked a lot about play structures for young children. There's a question about swings large enough for adults. I don't know if that goes to some an accessibility approach that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, Aisha.
There's so many great swings available now. Of course, there's smaller ones for little kids, all sorts of configurations for accessibility. We'll be sure that in the 5 to 12 year play area, we would include some swings in there that could accommodate adults. We might even pursue or talk to the community about, some of the saucer disc swings that can hold up to actually like 2 or 3 people.
Brad asks, how ultimately is the final design decided upon? Is there a voting process or is it figured out some other way?
I can talk a little bit about that. That's generally through this process of meeting as in our public meetings and our survey. So after we get additional information that further informs the design based on all the input that we've gathered, we will develop a final design based on that feedback. We'll have that option at the final public meeting to really discuss that design in more detail, and you can offer some additional input at that time as well.
I think the really critical component of developing the master plan is trying to determine what these programs are and these adjacencies. So, sounds like we definitely want to have some sort of community area, a playground, maybe we're still on the fence with the dog park. We'll sort through all of the comments. So that's really the goal of the master plan. And then when it really gets refined, is when we can start looking at some of those, quite literally the types of swings, among other things.
There is a question in the chat, and then I'm going to have Brad ask his question. If a splash pad is still on the table. There's also a related question from Karen. What is a splash pad?
So with a park like this one, we probably would not be pursuing a splash pad given some of the goals that we have for our sustainability goals within the city. Additionally, the maintenance of these splash pads has been difficult across the city because, again, it's not really meeting our every drop consideration as a part of our game plan for the city. So we would not be incorporating a splash pad in this area, but a splash pad it can look different depending on the design, but it's generally an area where you can either walk through or roll through and enjoy maybe some some spray features. We also have different water features that require kind of pumps in place. It can look different depending on how interested users would like to interact with the water feature. But this just wouldn't be something that we would be able to incorporate in this park.
You know, another thing, another driver, or pun intended, we do see people driving and parking to enjoy splash pads around the city. So now you have more traffic in addition to maintenance and water use.
Brad, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, my wife and I are on the same time. And first up, just appreciate everything you guys are doing and bringing this together. This is awesome to see. So appreciate all the work you are putting into this. I asked the question about kind of the decision-making process and appreciate the answer you gave. But, you know, some of these features seem to be pretty polarizing. I mean, the dog park in general, right? We're all putting in our comments as much as we can. That's kind of where I was sort of getting at of like, okay, if there's a polarizing sort of feature such as the dog park, which I think is going to be one, how are you going to determine whether or not to put one in or not? Are you just going to kind of count up all the comments, or like how do you really decide whether or not to put in a feature like that in this park?
Yeah, well, it's certainly based on the input that we receive. If we're getting an overwhelming amount of comments for or against, we obviously take that into consideration. But we also look to information that we have developed through the dog park master plan, for instance. We take a lot of consideration into maintenance and operation of different facilities within our parks. So all of those things combined will be considered when we're deciding whether to include or to not include a dog park. So it's a lot of factors to consider, and it's not always an easy answer, but we certainly rely heavily on the input that we receive through both the public meetings and our surveys.
Thanks, Mallory. Given that we're close to the end of our hour together, I think we've gone through all of the questions that have been put in the chat, and people have raised their hands. There are many, many more questions in the chat that we'll be incorporating into our thinking and into our analysis, but I'll turn it over to Aisha and Mallory to close this out.
Thank you, Nora. Right, we just want to wrap up and just remind you that we will be at the University Hills Holiday Market. So that's Sunday, November 20th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you have more ideas, we would love to have you come by. Again, our next steps is to really refine these three concepts to create one preferred alternative that will then be further refined during the next stage of design. Of course, keep an eye out, and if you're on the mailing list, you'll hear about the date for the public meeting, which we think is going to be in January, and that's when we will review the preferred park concept. And similar to this meeting, we of course want your feedback. We'll have lots of polls, and we'll have a Q&A so people can contribute. I think that's it. Did we have anything else after this slide other than just thank you? You know, thank you for your time, and thank you for your participation. It really informs what we do. Oh, and then just another shout out to the Near Southeast Neighborhood Planning Initiative. A lot of directions there. So, you know, if you can go to denvergov.org, Near Southeast Plan, you know, you can really start to set a vision for how this area is going to evolve. I think that's it. And there's Mallory's contact information.
Thank you, everyone. Please reach out with any questions you have. You can email me at my email address here. But thank you for joining this evening.
Thanks. Gonna end the meeting. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.